Good morning, sunshines. Welcome back. Your white model of your set for Lost in Yonkers is due today. Again, if you want to send me just a photograph of it, that's fine. If you want to bring it to class, that's fine. If you want to leave it in front of my office, that's fine. But I just need to get see what you're doing with your white model. Again, doesn't mean it can't change before your finished model. Matter of fact, if you're doing this in real life, it should change. The director will have a reaction to it and will respond to it, and may change the sides, or may change everything. But you just need to have, it should be very quickly done. Should not have taken, if it took more than an hour, you're way too much work on this. This is just, you don't have to worry about any kind of molding or any kind of color. You just need to know where the doors are, where the windows are, where the furniture is. Everything should be quick and dirty, yes? All right, so what we're gonna talk about today is drafting. Yay! A lot of times people get intimidated by drafting, but you shouldn't be, because drafting is just thinking. By the time when you start drafting, you have no idea what the set is. You sort of have an idea about where the windows, doors, based on your white model are, but even when you scale it using a scale rule, it's hard to exactly know how tall, how wide, all that sort of stuff. When you finish drafting, it is very easy then to take a ruler to the drafting and know the answers to how big, how tall, how wide, all that sort of stuff. And so even without knowing you've done it, you will have done it just by the simple fact that you've drafted it. Yes? So don't be afraid of drafting. Drafting is just figuring it out. Yes? It's a part of the process. It should not be intimidating whatsoever. We're going to go through in class the process of drawing a staircase. Well, for those of you who are watching online, there's a little bit about drafting. First of all, the tools. You're going to need a pencil of some sort. You're going to need a square rule, a T-square of some sort, something to hold a square to the edge of the table. You're going to need an architect's scale, or if you have a ruler, that's fine. But you're going to have to, with the ruler, you'll have to be able to interpret the inches into eighth cents and quarter inches, whereas the architect's rule does that for you. I would be weary of what's called an engineer's rule. It's a three-sided ruler, just like an architect's rule is, but it also has logarithms and other things on it that are not going to be useful for anything we do in theater, that's for sure. You're going to have a couple sets of triangles. One is called a 30, 60, 90 triangle. One is a 45-degree triangle. Those are typical types of triangles that we use in drafting. You're going to need an eraser. I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for 40 years. I erase about half what I do, and that's a lot. But it's not as much as you're going to erase. You're going to probably erase 90% of what you draw. So for that reason, there are three line weights we're going to talk about here in a second: lightweight, medium weight, and heavy. Always start with lightweight, because 90% of what you're going to draw is going to be erased. Yes? You're going to need some sort of paper, or what's called vellum. Vellum is translucent paper you can lay over the top of things, so you can tape down a drawing, a ground plan, for instance, of the theater, and then just lay a piece of vellum over the top of it, tape it down, and you can see the theater through the vellum, so you don't have to actually transfer that till the end. That way you can just work on what you're going to draw, the ground plan part, and then you can transfer, once you've got that figured out, then you can transfer the rest of the theater to the drawing or to the vellum. And then some sort of tape to hold things down. Again, we've got three types of line weight. Lightweight, which is barely visible to you and to those that are very easy to erase. You have medium weight line weights, which again are taking the lightweight line weights and filling them in a little bit harder so you can see them more plainly. And then heavyweight line weights are really cranking down the line. Those heavyweight line weights should be used for things like immovable walls, things that would take dynamite to get through, expensive changes. Yes, if you've got a column in the theater, for instance, if you're ever doing something with Tonka Depot, there's a post that is 6 feet from down center on the stage. That post is going to be in everybody's way. You need to draft that post in there, knowing that everybody's going to look around it. Yes, it doesn't move. It holds the building up. Yes, check that post out. You've lost it. So here's a little video. Again, watching this person draft. It's the front of a house, but it's the same basic idea. The elevation of the house, and you can see that they start with just a piece of paper, and in a little bit they're going to have a whole house drawn. Enjoy it. So there are two types of drafting. One is what's called an orthographic projection, which is where you see more than one side of an object at a time. I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a second. And one is what's called a straight line projection, where you just see one side of the object at a time. So let's talk about orthographic projections first. Orthographic, O-R-T-H-O, graphic projections. The most common type is what's called an isometric drawing. Isometric set means the equal scale. And so every angle, here's an example of an isometric drawing Cody's going to show you. Everything, you can see that each side has been elevated at a 30-degree angle in that drawing, yes? But everybody is in quarter-inch scale or half-inch scale or eighth-inch scale. Whatever the scale is, it's the same scale, even though the drawing has been turned and angled 30 degrees up on either side. And you can see from the top and the front and the side, you see three sides, that makes it orthographic projection, all at the same time. The second type of drawing is what's called an oblique drawing. And again, you see the little staircase here. The front of an oblique drawing is drawn flat on, just like it was a straight line projection. And then the other two sides are drawn at a 45 degrees or 30-degree angle off to the side. Yes? Now, in an oblique drawing, the scale of the drawings going to the side are the same scale as the front drawing. The problem is that can be distorted, or gives you a distorted view of things. And so the third type of orthographic projection is what's called a cabinet drawing, where you take the oblique drawing, same thing, where you draw the front face just normal as you would in a straight line projection. And then the return angles are both half the scale. So if your front drawing is in half-inch scale, the return drawings are in quarter-inch scale. If the front drawing is in quarter-inch scale, then the return angles are in eighth-inch scale in a cabinet drawing. So three types of orthographic projections: isometric, oblique, and cabinet drawings. Yes? Then the more typical type of drafting, and the type we're going to spend more time on, is the straight line projection. Again, here's an attempt to show you how you would look at a staircase, and you have the top view, the front view, and the side view. And all you see on each view is just what it looks like from that angle. Straight line projection, just exact, no distortion, no perspective, just a straight on view from that side, the height, the width, the length, all right there in front of you from your eye position on that side of the drawing. Yes? So that's what's called a straight line projection. And again, the scale depends upon how big it can be to fit on your paper. Yes? Now, there are several typical drawings you're going to find in the theater. First is what's called a ground plan. A ground plan is the overhead view of the stage from above. There are two very important lines that you're going to find in a ground plan. One is the center line. The center line is designated using the CL at the top, and then usually is a long dash, short dash through the middle of the drawing. Now, where there's also another line called the plaster line. The plaster line is the imaginary line that connects the upstage side of the proscenium, and where the two of those cross is what's called center-center. Now, let me tell you something. Actors, stage managers, set designers, when you say center-center, they're going to go farther upstage. They're going to go to the center of the drawing on the stage. But for set design and technical direction purposes, center-center is where the plaster line and the center line cross, and it's where you measure everything from when you're installing a set. Because again, the drawing may be a little off one way or the other, but if you start on center-center when you install the set will be centered by the time you finish it. But that's a ground plan view. Yes? Now, the other typical drawing you're going to have in the theater is what's called a section view. This is where you take the drawing of the theater and you cut it, instead of cutting the top off, you cut it down the middle of the room, and then you look at one side of the drawing. Again, the drawing I've given you here looks at the stage left side of this theater. You can see that the auditorium is angled, and you can also see that the floor has a person there sitting there, and you can see the sight lines of what that person can see. You can also see there's a little actor standing there. One of the things about the ground plan and the section view, when you have dotted lines, those are overhead construction lines. In other words, that's something hanging above the visible plane. So for instance, going back to the ground plan, where you have the solid lines, if you're cutting through the set at, let's say, 8 feet, the drawing shows you what you would look like from that point down. whereas above, well, let's say it's 6 feet because the door is 6'8". So the door would be above 6'8", so that door that stays right there is dotted because it's above the visible plane, yes? So again, you'll have hidden construction lines in both of those, yes? Or in all the other cases, that's an alternate construction line. It may be that there's a piece of scenery or something that sits there sometimes and sometimes doesn't sit there. But again, those are both the hash marks. Cool. The other type of drawing you're after is what's called a front elevation. Yes, the front elevation is going to show you what the piece looks like from the front. Now, if you have a dimensional object like this fireplace, it may be that you have a side view as well, or you could also do a section where you cut through the middle of it. I don't know if you can see there, but there's a center section of it that's cut through. You can see the niche and how deep it is and the radius that's involved. You've got the little bracket there that's got the highlighted detail. We don't actually have a drawing of the detail, but there would be a detailed drawing of that somewhere included with that. Again, it's assumed that, for instance, the stage left part of the fireplace where it's all decorated would be reverse and repeat on the stage right side of the mantle. Yes, but again, it's not completed just because that, it just takes some less drawing. Yes, so those are the type of things you're going to have with your elevations. Now, the technical director is going to take your elevations and make rear elevations out of them. In other words, figure out where the seams of the plywood go and where the support members need to be and all that sort of stuff. But that's not for you to figure out, that's for the technical director to figure out. Cool. On all of your drawings, you're going to do a title block. The title block should appear in the same corner of the drawing. Sometimes it's in the right, especially with the left margin. Sometimes when people staple several drawings together, they'll have all the title blocks on the left. Sometimes what I typically do is have it in the bottom right-hand corner. So when you're looking for a drawing, you can just flip through looking for the drawing number all at one time. You could also put it in the top right-hand corner. Whatever the decision is for where you're gonna put the title block though, it needs to be consistent so that as people are flipping through the drawings, they don't have to keep going from the top to the bottom to try and find your draftings, yes? The title block should have 7 things in it. It should have the drawing number. Each drawing number should be numbered 1 through however many you have. Yes, 1 through 5, 1 through 10, 1 through 15, whatever you got. Then there should be 1 of 15, 2 of 15, 3 of 15, whatever it is. It needs to have the title of the show. If you're doing Amadeus, you say Amadeus. If you're doing Midsummer Night's Dream, it's just Midsummer Night's Dream. The name of the space. So you have Theater AUM, or you could have the Davis Theater or Alabama Shakespeare Festival, whatever the name of the space is, that needs to go on there because it's going to be different every time you move to a new space. And then what's on the drawing? Is it a ground plan? Is it a section? Is it an elevation of the fireplace? Is it an elevation of the stage right wall? Is it an elevation of drop that you have? Whatever it is, whatever's on the drawing. You need to have what scale it's in. It's a 1/2 inch scale or a 1/4 inch scale, 1/8 inch scale. My suggestion to you is that ground plans can typically be half the scale of your elevations, but elevations want to be as big a scale as you can draw because that way there'll be as much detail on the drawing as you can get. Yes, you need the date of the drawing, so you can have, if you have 2 drawings of the same thing and one of them is dated today and one of them was dated last week, typically the one you dated today will be the more current, more up-to-date drawing, so you can look at it that way. Then the 7th thing is the paper trail. Who drew it? If I have questions, who do I go talk to? Who's the technical director? Who's the director? Any information you need about, if you're a carpenter building this, who do I go to ask questions of? So who the set designer is, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so the paper trail. Now, one of the things about architectural drawing is that you need to learn to write your letters so that they are visible. So here's a little bit on how to write like an architect.
Hi, I'm Doug Patt, and this is How to Architect. Today we'll learn how to write like an architect. The basic drafting tool for an architect when working by hand is a parallel rule. You can also use a T-square. I'll be using an Ames lettering guide to create the lines for the lettering. First, we're going to create our horizontal lines using the lettering guide. The guide has a variety of spacing options to create just about any combination you're looking for. I will also be using a small triangle. I've added tape to this one for ink lettering to avoid smearing. I'll also be using a 0.5mm Pentel drafting pencil and Papermate Flair pen for letters. I've created a small grid here to give me some guidance when I lay out the letters. I'd say the most important thing to remember about hand lettering is that your letters need to seem animated while still appearing orderly and neat. I think this is achieved by using a few conventions. For example, you'll notice the letters have some amount of incompleteness. The second diagonal on the A does not follow all the way to the guideline. The bottom of the B or D isn't complete. The bottom line on the E starts in front of the vertical. The second thing is that all the horizontals in the letters are drawn by hand, not using the parallel rule. They all sit at a slight angle, making them dynamic and yet uniform. You'll also notice that I use a ruler for all vertical lines. Lastly, when you're making your O's, Q's, C's, G's, even 8s and 9s, the letters and numbers are simply combinations of semicircles. Even the letter S is made the same way. These are two images from my portfolio. They're good examples of how your strings of words will come together to form orderly yet animated paragraphs. This is a quote I found from Tyrone Edwards' Dictionary of Thoughts. I enjoy referring to it from time to time. It seemed appropriate for a YouTube video because giving people the most amount of knowledge in the least amount of time is really what drives the information age. So remember, hand lettering is about style and legibility. Mine is definitely stylized and probably a little tough to read sometimes. So, thanks for checking out How to Write Like an Architect. I'm Doug Pat.
Yes. Now, again, that person's drawing, lettering was very artistic, very stylistic. I would say it was overly stylistic, but the point is you need to have it very, scale it off, have it nice and legible, and figure out what each letter needs to look the same consistently, yes? Let's talk about scale. If you ever see it written that 1/4 inch is equal to 1 foot 0 inches, as opposed to anything else you've ever heard in life, that is not the same as 1 foot equals 1/4 inch. If you have something that's 1/4 inch is equal to a foot, you're taking something that's very large and made it very small. If you have something that's 1 foot is equal to 1/4 inch, you have something that's very small that you have made very large. I hope that makes sense to you. If you've got a computer chip, for instance, it may be that you draw it 1 foot is equal to every 1/4 inch, because every 1/4 inch on that thing is going to be the whole size of the whole chip. So you've increased the drawing to be where it's a foot, right? Whereas in theater, we're taking something that is the size of a theater and we're going to reduce it down to the size of a paper. So as opposed to anything you've ever heard about math equals being the same on either side of the equal, not in scale drawing. In scale drawing, whatever one side is tells you what the other side is and vice versa, but you can't alternate them. I hope that makes sense. And then the last thing are extension and dimension lines. After you've finished everything on the drawing, you put your drawing in, you put your theater in, you put your title block in, then you need to go in and put what are called extension and dimension lines. The extension lines are the verticals that you'll draw your arrows to and from. The dimension lines will be your arrows you draw to and from. Leader lines will be ways to point to extension and dimension lines or to special objects, like the detail drawing that you had on the other page there. But then if you express measurements in feet and inches, somewhere on the drawing, everything needs to be in feet and inches. If you express the dimensions just in inches, everything needs to be just in inches. You shouldn't change back and forth between 3 foot 6 inches and then 42 inches, right? And if you're gonna have one, you need to be consistent. And I would suggest always having feet and inches. And again, 1 stroke is foot, 2 strokes is inches, yes? All right, so we're gonna do a little drafting project for next class, and you got your 10 sketches due again next time. Cool? We'll see you then.